All right. I see that there are a few questions that were written in the chat panel. So I'm going to share it with the rest of the group. If you have other questions, please send them to everyone in the group so we can see what your concerns are. All right. Now over to you. We're very happy to hear your thoughts on this. Any questions that you may have, we can start answering now, but we'll also be here in terms of support until the end of the week. And after that, Kashif will be your focal point, or your IMO's focal point for dealing with issues that you may have with the technical side of the prioritization tool. So, two questions. Does this map the current situation or the planned situation on the heat map? Can this be used for planning purposes as well? This is mostly a snapshot of the situation at the moment where the data was collected. So it's depending on the delay between the strategy and the implementation. It can be used for planning purposes, yes. But if the delay is too long and the situation is fluid and changes very quickly, it might not be the best way. But no one can read the future, so I think it's pretty much as good as it gets. Now a question from Marius in Ocha, Yemen. How about countries that have just decided on needs indicators, so don't have yet data on these indicators, and the CAP indicators are mostly outputs rather than needs indicators? I'm sorry, Marius, I'm not sure I understand your question. I will try to reformulate it. This tool is not exactly needs indicators, it's crisis indicators. It's going to help you identify where you have a big problem in each of the sectors, and it's accumulated one sector on top of the other. That's basically where you have big problems. But please reformulate, Marius, if it's not what you meant. All right, I have another question. Let me share it with everyone. Before I share it, Marius, you just wrote big problems equals needs, doesn't it? Yes and no. You may have a big problem in health, like child mortality under 5, for instance. That's a big problem. But it doesn't tell you what's your humanitarian need. It doesn't tell you whether you have a nutrition need. It doesn't tell you if you have a wash need. It doesn't tell you what your need is. All right. Anybody? How do you balance the agreement on weightage of indicators across the sector clusters? This was a question from Dipendra, and basically this is what we hope the normalized score would help us with. Basically, each of the cluster sectors can identify 2 to 5 or more indicators, and then they attribute weight that correspond to the importance of this indicator within their own sectors, right? And then it's normalized. So the weightage doesn't have a big influence when you compare cluster to cluster. I hope it answers your question. Now,
so Marius, this is Fahad, and just to clarify a little bit on the weightage, you can have an incremental weightage. So the cluster can come out 5, 10, 15, 20. We're not taking the weightage as it's on face value because we're doing a normalization, which is basically a percentage of the total. For example, if the total weight coming out of, for one indicator, the total weight is 10, and out of that, the indicator is coming out to somewhere in between about 5, we can say 50%. And we will use that 50 as a ranking score, not as not 5 or not 10. So even though education can be less important, but as long as they have the same weightage structure and can be normalized, or any other cluster which needs to be, compared with, they all will get normalized scores, which will be less, which will take care of this controversy.
All right, let me show you on the screen. I think you might see very quickly what we're talking about. So, for instance, here on the protection side here, you have 4 indicators, and the indicators are weighted 1, 2, 3, 4. So the maximum score for protection is a 4. But if you look at the health part here, you see that you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 indicators, and that the total score that you can get in health is 26. So what we mean by normalization is that we're going to compare the severity of each cluster or sector with the maximum score that they can achieve within their own cluster or sector. So a 2 out of 4 in protection will be a 50% achievement of 50% severity in this indicator, but a 4 out of 26, which is the maximum score for protection, would be much, much lower in terms of score. It would be percent of severity. So this would basically mean that you wouldn't have to go through a very painful poker game with all the sectors to identify what the weight of each sector is, because what the weight is applied to is the indicator within the cluster. All right, now let me take a few other questions. If you have more questions about the normalization and the weightage, please write to the CAS team, and we'll try to be as clear as possible. Now, question from Alicia. Please, everyone, question from Alicia is, if the country does not use this tool, what are the implications with regard to filling out the HMO? Will it still be valid? OPT has very small area of operation, and the area of priority are well known and described.
So this is also a question that came up in the other group. The prioritization tool is not a requirement to fill out the HMO template. It's a tool to help with the analysis at the end. You can fill out the HMO template by just having also a structured discussion where you look at the different sections in the template, where you have a discussion with your partner and identify what you need. Ideally, that's underlined with some sort of evidence base that you can demonstrate. But it's not a requirement, it's a tool to support it. Yeah.
Okay, so now a question from Rachel. Regarding selling this to our partners, does this have the support of a global cluster coordinators? It would help OCHA if country-level partners have been asked to support the process by their HQ.
Yeah. So there are various forms out there for prioritization models. This specific one has not been developed together with coordinators, because if that would be the case, we probably wouldn't be finished by 2015. But they are, at least through the Needs Assessment Task Force, we have been playing around with various models that help with systematizing structural information and coming out with some sort of prioritization. There is general support and understanding that this is needed. The tools we're developing in consultation more around newer, less around the HMO. However, experience shows in Afghanistan that yes, there was maybe some resistance at the beginning, but the second round around, clusters get more and more involved, they see the value in it, some have actually use it for their purposes, so that's something that's probably going to grow over time. Are clusters going to help with the implementation of it? We do hope so. They have been bilaterally consulted, but it was no formal process. We have consulted big ones, and they have seen it, and feedback so far has actually been very positive.
You can take the last one too, from Vincent. Is this supposed to work even in countries that have a prioritization system that works?
No, Vincent, as Magali said, if there's something in place that works, go with that. We developed a standardized model to help countries that do have nothing in place. If there's something that's working, use that. That is absolutely no problem. It wasn't designed to replace anything. What else? So questions are coming in.
So questions from Punya, just for clarification, in this example, many clusters have one indicator with different scoring criteria in each column. What? Yes, in this example, we use it for example purposes. It's possible to either have a scale of incrementing severity, or you can have, like here in health, you can have several unrelated indicators, and to each of the indicators, there's a weight that is applied with regard to its relative importance within the sector.
Marius, we'll follow up with you bilaterally to explain the normalization. I don't think you copied well what it means, and we'll follow up bilaterally. Any other comments? Any other questions? Okay, that's a good one, Marius. Access indicators. It doesn't require an access monitoring working group in order to fill out the access aspects in the prioritization tool or in the HMO template. It's really quite flexible in what's available in your country. At a minimum, there should be some narrative in the humanitarian needs overview of what the access challenges are. In more sophisticated context, we encourage to use that and full findings from access monitoring working group, but it's not a requirement in order to deliver at the end of the tender. Over. Any other questions? You're also welcome to, don't have to write, you're also welcome to talk over the microphone if that's easier, just flag it to us. This is a good one, another one from Marius, very active. If our data is statistically significant at the province level, is it fair to prioritize at the province level only?
There's Marius's question.
So I think if all the data sets, for example, all the indicators that you're looking at, and they have some kind of data set on the back, If it makes more sense that all the data sets consolidates at the provincial level, then of course that's an interagency decision to go with that kind of the level of administrative boundary. But you need to sometimes see, you cannot go a district for some indicators and for others at provincial level, because the consolidated report that comes out has to be on a similar administrative level. So if it makes sense for you at the provincial level or admin one level, at the country level, and that's where the data lies and reliable, then go for it, of course.
Sorry, Isabel. Yes, there were quite a few questions that were in line, so let me recopy your question to everyone. Here it is. Can you tell us how you derive the priority need in the HNO from the prioritization tool? Or is it a different parallel process? It's a linked process, and the findings that you find in the HNO should be the evidence support for the decision making afterwards. It should be used in the workshop to discuss with the rest of the humanitarian community how these findings are going to be transformed into strategic objectives.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Isabel. And you won't come around to have some form of wait, we have some muting problems here.
Okay.
You won't come around to hold some form of workshop or meeting where you have a structured discussion, and the prioritization tool in that case would help inform that discussion. The prioritization tool itself does not spit out, the 5 priority needs in the country. This is still something that will have to be discussed and negotiated with partners and agreed upon. The prioritization tool as such will help inform that, but it does not avoid having a discussion with partners. Yeah, basically.
By negotiation, we don't mean that we're going to play poker with the rest of the humanitarian community, but that we're going to agree on the findings that we identified through the prioritization tool, and how we're going to organize those sectorial findings into cross-cutting, cross-sectorial priorities.
Okay, so let's see.
Here.
We'll get back to Marius. Are there any questions about that? I might have missed.
Hold on. There's one from Marius. Yeah. Is there a global priority score across cluster sector, or it remains segregated on sectors? Is there a global heat map for the whole country? Yes, of course. That's. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear on this, but yes, there is of course a ranking that encompasses all of the sectors for the whole geographic area that you want. So if you look at your screen right now, it's the last few columns, CC and CV. It's the total score that is an accumulation. It is the sum of all the scores from all of the sectors. And you don't have it yet in your own tool, but you can see it on the screen. The last column is the normalized score that takes into consideration the no data issue. This normalized score here, that is the accumulation of the severity score in each of the sectors, is going to give you an idea, a ranking of the accumulated need per sector. And at the end, it's going to give you which areas are the worst off when you combine all the thematic or cluster indicators.
That's a good question from Guido.
hold on, just Marius, please send us your questions that you have on the normalization or on the prioritization. For us, it's very important that you feel comfortable with it because you're going to have to support it in your country if there are questions with the clusters. So we'd be very, very happy to help you with it.
Okay, Guido is raising a good question here. In Mali, they are working on a cluster performance indicator.
That's more of a monitoring of the plan.
Yeah.
More of a situation monitoring.
So the difference here, and the question is, the goal of this exercise is to monitor the status of the cluster response, and that these indicators will be linked to cluster strategy. So the fear is here that partners will confuse it with these indicators. I mean, the main difference is this is not a cluster performance monitoring tool. It's really trying to capture the situation now. The situation changes. Of course, and it doesn't because the situation changes, we can't necessarily make the link that's because of cluster intervention. So in your communication with partners, you probably have to highlight the point that this is really trying to analyze the situation and structure through situational indicators the cluster. Yeah.
Thank you, Marcus. Which reminds me of the question that was asked at yesterday's WebEx, and that is very important. This gives you a snapshot of the severity of the humanitarian situation with regard to a set of indicators that were chosen by the clusters. Now, if there is a large humanitarian presence in an area and they're very active in responding to the crisis, there is a very high probability that the severity of the indicators will be skewed. Because if they're already active in the area, the situation will look like it is better than it probably is, or at least it would be if the humanitarian community wasn't here. So this is also to be taken into consideration at the moment when you do your analysis.
Okay. Okay. So, another question?
Yeah, a few more questions from Guido. No, don't worry, no bother at all. We're here to discuss it. Very happy to answer your questions now because it's the right moment. So, I see that you agree and you understand that this would be a preliminary work to be done before they work on their strategies. At this work, which is great. Should be able to provide elements for the clusters to say their strategies in a more specific way. Yes, this is absolutely the intention of it. It's also, if you look at the cluster / sector worksheet, you have the recap and you have the overview, right? And in the overview, I've put it here deliberately so that the clusters also can use it as a strategic or planification tool. So very much agree with you. And your fear is that they might get confused. Yeah. Can you explain? Okay. Could we insert indicators related to basic service units to identify more technical needs? For example, to be able to see if a health center is functional or not, and in case of a massive return of population, is the health center able to absorb population? Absolutely. I mean, you can. Hold on. I'll let Fawad take this one, of course.
Because we have done this before, so either you can put the health centers as one of the indicators saying 0 to 25% health centers operational, 25 to 60% operational, or if you like, if you want to make sure that your needs versus your response is monitored the same, you can also put response indicators, which means they will have a positive value. meaning you can actually deduct it from the overall ranking. For example, you can say number of health organizations working in the geographical area, and a scoring can come out of that, even though the health problems are great in that area, but you also have a lot of response going on. So you can plus minus the ranking between them as well. So if you go into the Pakistan example, I think there are a few indicators which are response indicators which have been added in at least one on each of the sectors. You can have a look and give you some ideas on it.
All right. Thank you, Guido, for your questions. I think it was probably two questions that other people had, so it answers to wider concerns. Any other questions that you may have? Okay, got one from Marius. Reformulating my first question. I think this is relevant for the whole conference, yes. How about countries that have just decided on top-level indicators that reflect humanitarian needs? Countries where data about the humanitarian needs is not homogeneous across the country because data is collected by different actors. So countries that don't have yet homogeneous data capturing humanitarian needs across indicators. In our case, also, the CAP 2013 indicators are mostly output response from agencies, not really humanitarian needs indicators.
So, Marius, the first thing you need to also realize that some of them, the indicators that you're working in is mostly are response indicators. For example, you're actually looking into activity-based monitoring. And that's why there's some confusion. The indicators you can actually choose, any indicator you can choose at the cluster level as long as it comes out and provides you a picture of the humanitarian situation in that geographical area. For example, Magali went down to this example of how you can use either a very granular indicator giving you very specific information, or if you don't have information in that depth, you can come out and say, no schools operating or some schools operating, or, you can go into that kind of ambiguity. So it's up to you. If you have, in some clusters, you will find information more structured and indicators, information structure around indicators. But if you need to keep all the clusters together, you can have advanced indicators in one of the clusters, but at the same time, make sure other clusters have some indicators in place so you can come out with a global picture. I mean, that's the whole idea, and that's more of a coordination role than anything else.
Also, Marius, for some of the countries like DRC, Pakistan, or Afghanistan, this tool is probably quite simple and easy because they've done it a couple of times before. For some of the countries, it's the first time that there will be a prioritization exercise. And given that we're really tight on schedule, we decided to go through a very easy tool to use. There are many countries for which we would need to go a bit more in depth, and we would need to carry out more coordinated assessments, collect more data, but we're just going to have to do with what we have, what existed in country for this year. Will improve on also what we can do for 2014.
So on the same point, in case you have assessments going on for one sector, and for example, a rich monitoring system exists in food security, a monthly monitoring report, a market survey that you can feed into. But at the same time, in other clusters, you don't have any assessments or monitoring happening. You can still work with the perception of the cluster. The cluster leads, cluster lead can get the cluster members together, and they can have a perception-based discussion that can also generate the ranking. But at the same time, we would like to know if the decision has been taken based on perceptions or the data. In case you don't have data available, that means the perceptions can be used, but it needs to have some kind of evidence based around it.
All right. Another question from Jean-Luc in IT is, we already use this kind of tools to develop thematic snapshots on food security, IDB, cholera epidemic, etc. And multi-risk vulnerability analysis based on communal level. My question is, the position of this tool in transition process with downsizing of clusters, more transfer to government structure, etc.
Yeah, in Pakistan, after 2010 floods, the tool was actually used as a transition tool to hand over to the early recovery, which also meant government taking up the control. So if you don't have time to do an overall assessment post-disaster, this can also provide you an overall picture to hand over to the government. And also it can give you a little bit on residual relief needs in the country at the time of the transition. Also to add, you have received the list of the focal points, and please refer to your focal points for more bilateral discussions. If you want to share the tools that you're already using for us to provide you advice, please do so. Please contact those focal points in CAS, and we will revert back to you after reviewing your tools that you're existing in the country.
We have recorded the session. We'll have to edit it a little bit down. But the idea is that you can use that recorded session for whatever purpose you think is fit in your country context. May that be for presenting it to your trusted partners. We will also share the presentation. You have the full guidance package, and there will also be a short video on how to fill out the template. We hope with that to provide you with a full, easy-to-access package that you can really use for the work. We are CAS and standby to support you for the HNOs and those countries that will be working on a prioritization tool. We are also here for full support. Some countries might decide to choose it later in the round or next year. We're also happy, to support those that will choose a slower track with it. So if there are no further questions, please do not hesitate to follow up with us bilaterally. Write an email to one of us four, Kashif, Fawad, Magali, or myself. Some of us will be on mission next week, so Kashif will be your main focal point on the prioritization tool. With regards to the HNO, it will be myself and Cecilia, as you can find in the attached list also that we sent around of focal points.